Now, the African Development Bank is injecting a significant dose of optimism into Nigeria's economy with a $1 billion loan facility aimed at driving structural reforms in the energy sector. It's a move that's designed to unlock this country's vast potential, and it could pave the way for considerable growth and development. But that's not all. The African Development Bank is also rallying behind Nigeria's ambitious plan to establish special agro-industrial processing zones designed to attract private investors and transform this country's processing landscape. By clustering such facilities near major transportation hubs, the aim is to help transform Nigeria into a regional powerhouse, creating jobs, stimulating economic activity, and improving livelihoods. All this appears to reflect growing confidence in Nigeria's economic reforms as the way to address long-standing challenges, improve the business environment, and drive growth. So is the stage set for a game-changing partnership that could reshape Nigeria's economic destiny?
This is a project that was approved by the African Development Bank and partners, financed with $223 million, of which, of course, the African Development Bank is contributing $124 million, and AfD is coming on board with $60 million. But why water? Why water and sanitation? Water and sanitation are very important for the state. This state has a very high agricultural potential. It has a good population. But we also want to ensure that this population is connected to water and sanitation services. So primarily, this project seeks to create opportunities to access sustainable water and sanitation services for the people of Ondo State, of course, but also enable the state to have the capacity to undertake deep-rooted water sector reform that will allow sustainability going forward. It will build water infrastructure for the city of Akure and its surrounding villages, but also satellite towns.
And that's the Director General of the AfDB in Nigeria here. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the Special Advisor to President Tinubu on Finance and the Economy, Sanyade Okoli, who is also the Principal Aide to the Finance and Coordinating Minister for the Nigerian Economy. And I'm also joined by the Executive Director representing Nigeria and Sao Tome and Principe on the board of the African Development Bank, Dr. Oyebode Oyetunde. Thank you very much indeed. Good to see both of you. And let me start with you, of course, the lady. How does this government plan to leverage the AfDB's $1 billion loan facility to drive economic growth and address sort of other pressing challenges in this country, like insecurity and corruption, in the midst of this thing taking place?
Good evening, and good to be in an Arise studio after so long. As you mentioned, it's $1 billion, but it's across 4 different programs, and I'm sure Bode will speak more about the different programs. But if we really step back, what Mr. President is very focused on achieving at this time is driving inclusive growth and growth that lifts Nigerians out of poverty. And related to that are key sectors that have been identified as drivers of job-creating growth. One of them is the energy sector, and it's energy sector on multiple levels. If we're looking to drive industry and manufacturing, we all know the need to bridge the energy deficit that we're facing.
Indeed.
Another such sector is the agricultural. Again, not just from an economic growth standpoint, but also the impact it's had on inflation, and it also helps with the job creation. Then, of course, we talk about food security. So the programs that we're talking about align very neatly with the inclusive growth agenda. And you mentioned insecurity, etc. You know, one key to addressing insecurity is job creation. Having people doing work that A, keeps them fully engaged, but also helps them to move away from poverty. I'll pause there.
Okay, well, let me unpause you because I
No
want to
problem.
ask a sort of follow-up question,
Okay.
because actually the original question was going to be, clearly the AfDB has put a lot of confidence in the, I mean, they're saying to you that we're confident in the reforms that you're embarking on. What message does that confidence in Nigeria's economic reform send to the government and hopefully to the people of Nigeria?
So it is, for us, reassuring that the work that we've been doing to have the Nigerian economy at a place where you can begin to talk about rapid and sustained growth. Because the reality is, to drive growth, there are certain things that need to be in place. You need a certain level of macroeconomic stability. You need to be able to engender confidence, of the confidence of investors in your economy to invest both locally and foreign investors. And with what AfDB has done, it is saying to us and saying to Nigerians that they believe that the administration has been doing the work to make the Nigerian economy more attractive to investors, equity investors, debt investors, just the Nigerian economy being more attractive.
And Doc, let me come to you, because clearly your confidence, the confidence of the bank in Nigeria is growing, which is why you're putting your money sort of where your mouth is. But I mean, a lot of people would say that this country has a lot of challenges. I mean, one of the big ones, particularly for international people, is the issue of corruption in this country. Why is the AfDB confident that despite those challenges, the country's economic reforms are worthy of investing $1 billion into it? And that's just one of other investments that you're making.
Thanks, Charles, and thanks for having us on the show. Well, to come to your question, as Special Advisor to the President already mentioned, the $1 billion comprises 4 different operations. So on the 24th of November, we approved as a board the $500 million Economic Governance and Energy Transition Support Program. Now, it's a 2-stage program. We had $500 million last year. There were very clear deliverables in 2 areas: power and fiscal reforms. And over the year, we've seen such tremendous change in progress and reforms that we're really confident in. The board was able to approve an additional $500 million. So combined over the 2 years, that's $1 billion. And what reforms do we see? In the power sector, the energy transition plan was put in place. We had the deregulation of TCN, so that's no longer its regulator. You had policy documents out. Earlier this year, we're in Tanzania with then President Adesina and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu signing the Energy Compact for Nigeria. That's going to see how we transform Nigeria's energy situation. And we key into what we at the AfDB are working closely with the World Bank to do, which is Mission 300, trying to lift 300 million people out of energy insecurity by the year 2030. So over those 2 years, we've seen incredible reforms, and this was tied to the World Bank's other budget support. And both of us have seen reforms in terms of what has happened. The other projects, of course, the 140 million Akure project that our Director General in Akure spoke
the water
about.
project you were talking about.
And then, of course, we had a project focused on agriculture, the SAPZ. We've done $210 million last year. Recently, on the 1st of December, approved another $200 million. So that's showing increased performance. And then we have some other operations lined up, particularly one we call NAGS for agriculture, which is $100 million, and that's going to be coming up for board approval later this week.
Well, that's a lot of money you're putting into this country. I mean, with all due respect to the government, I mean, I wonder, because I mean, you're a bank and you assess risk before you put your money in there. And I'm wondering whether you see issues such as insecurity, crime, we mentioned corruption, as a risk to your investment.
Well, the challenge is not just Nigerian specific, it's across the continent. The AfDB exists to lend to the 54 African regional member countries. Some, of course, high risk, some medium risk, some low risk. But all of us have our challenges. We're seeing this across the board. We're active in conflict areas like South Sudan. We're active in Somalia. We're active in transition states. And we're active, of course, in our larger countries like Nigeria, which is the only country, by the way, that has a whole regional department dedicated to it. Putting in context, we've got 6 regional departments, one for North, East, South, Central, West Africa. Nigeria is the only country that has its own regional directorate, which is headed, of course, by Abdul Kamara. We've had a transition, as you know. We now have President Sidi Uta, who's our president, but that commitment to Nigeria is still going strong. So we look at the challenges and we see how we can intervene as a bank to help address these challenges. But it's not just specific to Nigeria. Everybody's suffering from many of the same issues: fiscal constraints, jobs, unemployment, and security.
Right, and I mean, let me ask you this, and I don't mean to be banging on about it, but from an international point of view, those are the things that are always in the back of people's minds. I mean, is there a particular, if you like, set of things that the government plans to do to ensure transparency, accountability in the management, for instance, of this money that's coming from the AfDB, that will reassure not just them, but other potential lenders from other parts of the world? I mean,
okay, so as I'm sure you're aware, when the government such as ours take such loans, they are monitored very closely by the lenders. So the likes of AfDB obviously would have put in place the necessary controls.
Yeah, but in many ways they've also complained about, I mean, I've talked to a lot of them off the record, and they've complained about the way things are often managed within Nigeria, and the way that things are run in this country. So
where I was going was that I'm hoping that you've also followed a lot of what the Ministry of Finance has been doing with greater automation, greater digitization. For example, there's the RevUp initiative, where the team, the minister, now has much greater visibility regarding the revenues that come into the system and how money is expended. So it is very much work in progress. But my point is, it's not just about the AfDB loan, but it's about Nigeria's fiscal full stop.
Right.
And I think it's also, I should remind us all that because of the level of progress that has been made since this government came in, we've had 2 ratings upgrade from Fitch and from Moody's, and then we also recently had Standard & Poor's change the outlook from stable to positive. So a lot of work is being done, but there's also that recognition that a lot of work does need to continue to be done.
And does this, I mean, obviously one of the key things in all of this is how it impacts the people. It's not so much the sort of the numbers on a sort of blue computer screen. It's how it trickles down to sort of the Nigerian people in terms of what difference it's going to make. Is that something that you take into consideration when you're sort of disbursing these loans?
Absolutely. Just to divvy up on what Senator just said, many of these projects that are part of this $1 billion support for Nigeria this year are in phase 2. So we have the Economic Governance and Energy Transition Reform Program. This is the phase 2. So we had to go through all the conditions that we had put and targets. It's a policy-based operation. Basically, if you reform, then we provide the funds. And based on what we saw, the board was satisfied that Nigeria made enough progress last year to justify the second stage. Now, that's on the macroeconomic side, and basically on the power sector, we're seeing huge reforms. In terms of the fiscal space, we have the 4 tax acts.
What kind of reforms have you seen? Because, you know, for most ordinary people, and that's why I bring that in, all they want to do is switch on the light and it stays on.
It gets there eventually. But if you look at the power sector, there are many issues that need to be addressed. For instance, under the leadership of President Tinubu, there's been deregulation so that states themselves can regulate their own markets. That's improving. Many people would know that the challenge we have is not really generation, but we have maybe between 8 and 12, depends, gigawatts of power capacity or distribution. It's actually in transmission, and we have operations focused on that. And of course, now that we have TCN no longer being its own regulator, it has its regulator outside itself. We hope to see better progress there, and that this ultimately will lead to increased outcomes for people at the basically in their meters and their availability and affordability of power. We're also doing a lot of distributed power solutions, focusing on solar, particularly trying to fast-track Nigeria's climate change commitments and net zero ambitions. But moving back to people, a lot of the operations we are doing are directly at agriculture. For instance, the 200 million SAPZ operation phase 2, tranche 1, which we're targeting 10 states. In the first phase, phase 1 of the operation, we targeted 7 states plus the FCT. And they're going ahead, and what we're trying to do is create these agricultural processing zones where people can co-locate their industrial processing businesses between the farm and between the factory, between the farm and between the port, and then trying to find ways of ensuring that those investments are catalyzed in these organic economic zones. We expect that we'll create about 1 million jobs through this in 2 initiatives, basically 700 indirect and maybe about 300 direct, and they will create employment and gainful activity. And that's something that Senator had mentioned as a guard against insecurity. Finally, we have the support and the, how will I say, we're a trusted broker position. The African Development Bank is very influential. People listen to us, listen to our presidents. And there's a way we can encourage African countries, not just Nigeria, to reform and improve the social economic outcomes for their people. We continue to do this with support. So in terms of the criticism you may have heard about some of the operations here and there, we're providing some direct support for our middle income technical assistance facility to enhance the capacity of project implementation units like the Department of International Relations and the Ministry of Finance, so they can do their work better and more optimally going forward.
Very interesting. And just before we go, because literally we've got about 1.5 minutes, it's amazing really how time flies. But can you just, beyond the African Development Bank, I mean, it's not every day that we have you in the studio, so if you could just sort of lay out for us what the plan is, broadly speaking, going forward, where economic growth is sort of balanced against social development.
Okay, so as I mentioned, it's growth, but growth that lifts Nigerians out of poverty. So the economic management team, for example, have a dual focus that they're working on. In the medium term, they're looking to drive 7% growth that comes with decent jobs, but also improving human capital, including social protection. And, you know, I spoke about some of the priorities and what they're doing, and in fact, they have another meeting next week where they have identified the metrics and metrics that they think are meaningful to the Nigerians. So looking at food production, for example, looking at the electricity that gets to homes and businesses, and identifying what matters most and ensuring that it is being tracked. And as I said, to drive that growth, you need investment. So they're also looking at making the Nigerian economy more attractive to investors, improve macroeconomic stability. When it comes to policies, stable, meaningful governance framework, policy framework, regulatory framework. The third pillar they're working on is infrastructure, looking at the roads, you know, we've spoken about power. And the last piece is access to capital, both on the debt side and on the equity side, because those are the different things that are required to drive the kind of growth that they're looking at.
Okay, there's a lot more to talk about this, but I'm really grateful to both of you for coming in to share this with us. Oyebode Okoli is the Special Advisor to President Tinubu on Finance and the Economy. She's also the Principal Aide to the Finance and Coordinating Minister for the Nigerian Economy. And of course, Dr. Oyebode Oyetunde is the Executive Director representing Nigeria and Sao Tome and Principe on the board of the African Development Bank. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Charles.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.